All right. How are we looking, James? Can we get a little audio check here?
I am still working on it. Sorry about that. You might be able to right-click my name in Discord and pump me up that way
Yeah, I,
as
I
well.
got you at 200. You actually sound a little better now. So maybe just try to speak up a little bit and project, pretend you're yelling into an auditorium and there's somebody in the back who's like, "What the fuck's that guy saying? What?" And
Sounds good.
we'll be in good shape. There you go. That was perfect. Beautiful. I love it. And now I'm going to actually take you down to 180. There we go. Perfect. All right. Let's get started, boys. Let's jump on in. So, folks, a small preamble here. You've got Ziori, you've got IG Jeff, you've got IG James. Some big minds here on this chat. Thank you for joining us. This will be a similar format to what we did yesterday about the Great Rebalance, aka Make Farming Great Again. We're recording right now. We're going to have this uploaded right away, and then this will kick off a thread so we can have a more targeted discussion, allow folks that aren't able to make it during the live chat. And yeah, we want to get community buy-in here. The goal of this is to present some big ideas for jousting. Our directive was to kind of dream big. Don't think as much about engineering resources or anything like that, but just think about what's going to make jousting actually fun and exciting and approachable, and get community really jazzed about it. So this is one that you guys tend to be pretty vocal, but would really appreciate that vocality on this one, where we're looking for a strong signal. If we go through these changes and you feel like that sounds awesome, if you are shipping all of that tomorrow, I can't wait to joust. Like, I would love to hear that, and that would just be really useful feedback. And of course, if it's the other way, where you feel like, hey, this doesn't really sound that cool, or this sounds like a lot and I don't really know if it's going to make me want to joust more, we would love to hear that as well. So, just like yesterday, we'll kind of go step by step and work our way up into some different concepts, some very specific and some a little bit more high level. And if you have some questions, we'll be paying attention there, or at least I'll be looking at the Discord channel as well as Twitch chat, and do my best. I don't want to interrupt the flow completely, but I do read them. Even if I don't read your question exactly, it does help me try to kind of frame the conversation. And yeah, I am looking. So without further ado, gentlemen, let's jump in here. Welcome to the three-way. I'm used to doing this with Jeff, and now we're going to play hot potato. So I guess we should say hi, James. How are we this morning? Thanks for joining us, man. It's a pleasure to have another musketeer with us.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's my first presentation like this with the community, so I'm excited.
Yes, indeed. And Jeff, sounds like you're doing chipper today. It's been a hell of a week. A lot of moving parts, a lot of community feedback, but it's also good. I feel like we're making great progress and moving quickly without sacrificing quality, and that always feels good.
Absolutely. It's been a great week, a very productive week, and yeah, very, very happy with how things have turned out so far.
All right. And of course, Twilight Tactics kicking off is exciting. Minions are going to get staked, and we'll have unicorns starting those battles on Monday. So for now, let's stay targeted on jousting. Key highlights here. Per usual, I'd like to get things started with an overview of what we're going to talk about. We kind of have it into four big buckets. Number one, some new bracket types, large and small. We have some ideas to make jousting more accessible on the low end, we're going to talk about, as well as adding some bracket types on the high end, a platinum tier, if you will, for the high rollers that really want to push the envelope. We've talked about leaderboards. When it was brought up before, it tested very well, so to speak. The one of one unicorns, I think, are a perfect prize for this. So something we'd talked about before, but want to resurface this and reaffirm the strong signal around leaderboards, because there is some work to do to get the data reporting in a position where we're ready to do something with that level of prizing. Enhanced balance, that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. Maybe the meat of it, various balance changes that will allow this algorithm to make jousting more dynamic and level the playing field for more unicorns. And we're going to talk about a tuning update, something that'll be a little bit more short term compared to these other changes that are a little bit more in like overhaul category, that are going to take a little more time and certainly into 2024. So at the end, we'll talk about what's coming up in the short term, which will hopefully be fun while we work out these bigger changes. So let's move forward here. Um, James, you want to take this and give us intro into the Iron Bracket, ELO-free jousting items.
Yeah, the Iron Bracket was kind of an initiative we came up with based on player feedback where, and this is something I've wanted for a while, but we've been reluctant to just for player liquidity reasons. But I really like the idea of having kind of a sheltered area where the non-high stat corns have a chance to play and compete and try out jousting without having to worry about just getting mud hole stumped by a super high stat corn. So that's the main spirit of iron brackets. And not having your elo score messed up by this is by competing in this is kind of a big part of it. So we did get the okay that that's doable. So that's one of the main components of iron brackets.
Right, because otherwise we'd have this little elo bubble because it's gated, so you would have all of these really high elo corns at 1200 and it wouldn't really make any sense. So it's kind of like a training ground, low stakes, but in terms of collecting rewards, we'll have jousting gift boxes, codex pages. We're introducing all of these other layers with tribes, so this just gives us one more opportunity to enhance that new player experience, I think, and connect them to jousting in a way that's more accessible, but doesn't take anything away from the existing experience. This should really only appeal to corns that already feel pretty left out of jousting because they just don't exist on the power curve. And Jeff, this was something that you had mentioned weekdays. Instead of having this compete with weekends, this could be like the weekday kind of trial ground outside of the regular events, the bronze, silver, gold that we have going on weekend times.
Exactly. It's something where if you just want to grind for items in a low stakes environment, um, uh, with a low cost, this is the area for you.
And on the other side, we've got our platinum bracket, the high roller table. So James, take us through this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the opposite, right? Where Iron Bracket is kind of your chance to play if you want to avoid, you know, getting stomped. The Platinum Bracket is if you're the hyper competitive breeder, you think you've got the best corn out there. This is your chance to prove it and take it a step beyond gold, right? So you can bring your corns to the high rollers table, and it's a higher cost to entry, but the rewards are higher. So the idea here being like if you're slightly interested in jousting and you're only going to watch like one or two brackets over the weekend, this is probably the one you're going to check out just to see who's talking
And the
about.
key thing here is that this is not a new bracket that's exclusive. So right now you can't be in silver and gold at the same time, right? It's a break point. Once you're over the threshold, you go into gold. In this case, you could still play gold if you wanted to, but if you're good at gold and you've gotten over 1800, you'll now have the choice to participate in platinum. So obviously with this one, it would be lower liquidity, but the idea is that it would run, now that we have the targeted liquidity, there would still be enough that it could fill. And this is also a number that we could play with looking at the way things were set up. I think 1800 felt pretty good. But yeah, Jeff, I don't know
Yeah,
if you had anything, or yeah, go ahead, please.
and I touched on player liquidity. That this is the concern is splitting player liquidity and not having enough players to go around. But I think both of these bracket types, by providing these kind of targeted areas, and obviously with platinum being opt-in, the idea is we're creating some space for more players to join in jousting, and hopefully, the goal is to overall improve the amount of players playing, right?
Absolutely. Oop, back one here. And then the last one, this is the leaderboard, as I mentioned. So I remember talking to the community about this in various threads over the last couple months. But this was even talked about at the beginning of jousting. Finally, getting a leaderboard set up. The main caveat here is that we want to do more than one of one unicorn. One for first place. I think that makes sense. And then another one that is somehow kind of raffled off so it's a little bit more accessible. Something to the tune of every joust that you participate in gives you like a raffle ticket over the course of the leaderboard. Then when the leaderboard ends, we draw somebody and it's weighted based on how many that you have. So if you're a top performer and you play jousting a lot, obviously you have a much higher chance to win than somebody who just plays jousting a little bit, but it makes it more accessible for folks that know like, hey, I'm never gonna win, right? I know winning like a jousting leaderboard is going to be for a really hardcore player, but I'd love to have a chance and have, this jackpot that I could hit for a really cool Grail unicorn. I really like that idea. So to me, that's what stands out about this leaderboard. Not just that it has one of one unicorns, but it's trying to be a little bit more accessible, again, without taking away from the competition aspect and being first place. This is obviously something that would not happen in 2023. We've got a jam-packed calendar. This would be a 2024 thing. But yeah, Jeff, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add about this leaderboard, but this was one of the ideas that I liked, so you can obviously tell that I'm gushing about it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Going into 2024, as we set up Twilight Tactics, as we set up Tribe gameplay, we're definitely going to organize content around seasons, and so it just makes sense to have a jousting season with a seasonal leaderboard. And one of one corns. I mean, we have to give them out somehow. We have 98 more to go, so I think the prizes just make sense here.
Yeah. Okay, James, this is the real good stuff here. Potential balance changes. So important to note again, we've talked about this in text, but I just want to reiterate definitions. There's a difference between tuning changes and like engineering required algorithmic changes. They're fundamentally different in the sense that tuning changes is a little more like, hey, we have this variable and we can change the value of that variable, and that's something that we can push in a tuning update that can get batched in very easily with other stuff. Things that require more specific engineering time are just a bigger resource ask, mostly because they require more testing, right? Shipping stuff to the live client, there's just a different kind of risk involved with that deployment compared to just changing a numerical variable down by 5 or 10% or something. So we often talk about tuning changes. What we're going to talk about right now are a little bit more involved beyond just tuning. So this is again stuff that we're looking for some high signal on here, whether or not this is actually enticing for more jousting or if this is just like, eh. We're hopefully looking for a little more excitement than just for what we need to commit to this, if that makes sense. So. All right, let's jump in here. First one up, recovery. James, this is one that we had talked about a little bit before. Walk us through recovery.
Yeah, so one of the biggest struggles we've had with balancing Joust is simply providing enough value on the defensive side of the equation, right? Um, Power, intelligence right now are very, influential. So uh, having hit some roadblocks, just getting this done via tuning, that's a big focus of these proposed changes. Where if we can get community buy-in, players are excited about this, we can get the go ahead to have engineers make some changes, kind of under the hood rather than just tweaking things with tuning. So uh, one of the ones I'm most excited about is getting some value out of endurance, because that's one where we've had a lot of success tuning how well play or unicorns can recover from a knockdown. But the fact of the matter is, if you can't put points on the board, if you can't come back and hit the other unicorn because you don't have those offensive stats, it really doesn't matter that much if you recover. You're just kind of prolonging the inevitable, right? Like you're getting back up, but you're still going to lose on points. So by giving players a way to get points via recovering from a knockdown by granting a percentage of those knockdown points awarded to the other unicorn, right? Um, that lets me actually earn points for recovering. So my high endurance stat will actually get me on the scoreboard, get me some wins where, if that uh, if the subsequent joust the other guy misses and I've got that recovery, that might end up being the difference between winning and losing
Right.
that match.
And we've seen that anecdotally on our Saturday broadcasts. Another one coming up tomorrow. Hopefully, you guys will come join us on Twitch. But when you recover, it's really hard to make up the damage because not only does the joust or the knockdown give you a chance to win, but gives you a huge amount of points, stronger than a stagger or anything else. So we
Yeah.
were thinking about tuning it somewhere to that like 30 to 50% of knockdown damage. I don't know that it'll be pegged specifically to knockdown damage, but I think that's just the the degree to which we would like to tune it. So knockdowns are still a big deal and they're still very powerful. But this would be a significant buff to this mechanic that I think will help bring it up to snuff. Um,
Yeah, and that's one thing just
yep.
on all of these proposed changes that's worth mentioning is this is what we're thinking about doing. This 30 to 50% figure isn't set in stone. Um, so if players feel strongly that it should be implemented differently, I'd love to hear those ideas. But broadly, this 30 to 50% figure is I think we'd be targeting kind of the difference between that attacking unicorns stagger and knockdown value in points is what
Mhm.
we would be shooting at, giving that endurance corn for recovering, right?
Yeah, I think that makes some sense as well. All right. So number two, speed boost. A big change here, taking it from really just being a multiplier on power and amplifying more of like a well-rounded buff in terms of criticals and hitting and knockdown chances and all that. What else am I missing here about the speed boost update?
Yeah, I mean, speed boost is another area where I think even just from kind of a feel perspective, we want to improve it where, you see it go off, your unicorn goes Super Saiyan, and it's a lot of the time it's not really that visible of a difference or um, if you're a high stat or a high power corn you'll probably notice it because it's synergizing with what the stat build you've already got, but for other unicorns it's probably not as big a deal or as helpful as it could be. So what we're doing here is rather than contributing a buff to something like power or intelligence or another stat, um, we're adjusting the product that of those stats, right? So those stats feed into the formula that produces your hit chance or your knockdown chance. So by modifying that product directly and changing that percentage, it's a much heavier hand on the scales, so it should be a more pronounced effect. So and again,
Okay.
these aren't set in stone as far as which one it's affecting, but these are the types of figures we're looking at affecting with these speed boosts. So essentially,
So speed will be
that's
more like the when you see the speed boost or the stumble, it has universally on average a larger impact than it will right now, regardless of kind of corn breakdown. And
yeah,
stumbles will kind of be the inverse option. And right now it's like as an amplifier of power, a stumble or speed boost will actually hurt or not be a big deal depending on how much power you have, I guess essentially, right? In the
yeah,
current build. So this will help make boosts and stumbles more significant.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the difference between if I get a boost to power and that could end up being anywhere from like 1% to 5% or something like that hit chance. Whereas if we can straight up say, hey, you've got a speed boost plus 10% knockdown, that's very significant and
Gotcha.
it's very simple to understand. And on the flip side, yeah, as you said, stumbles, it's the same thing. As speed boosts become more influential, so will stumbles. So getting a
Right.
stumble will really suck. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Okay, and this one is pretty simple. The idea is just make the RPS a bit more meaningful, and I think the idea, both behind this change as well as the one we just saw, is to add a little bit more variance to break things up. So you have these different layers that the RPS can be a break even or swing in different directions. And then now same with the dice roll of hitting a stumble or getting a speed boost, or maybe they even cancel each other out. It just helps add more, I guess, more variety. I don't want to say more random, but um, it helps break up the monotony when you see these kind of mere matchups, let's call them.
Yeah, well, and I mean, when we break it down, right, like this is a fairly passive game style, so the interactions and the skill comes in, excuse me, come in through, the breeding is a huge one. But as far as the base interactions with the game, you're picking your corn, you're picking your stance, and you're picking your potions, right? So um, we want to make sure each one of those choices is as impactful as we can make it. So um, again, as we've detuned power, the impact of that power buff that you get from getting the right stance match, from getting, a
Right.
potion, etc., has
Okay.
also been reduced.
So
So
a lot of this is just around descoping power as the main mechanic, and rebalancing out the various triggers that can happen so that they're impactful across the board. Um,
yeah, exactly. And this way
gotcha.
it affects every unicorn equally. And if I'm an endurance corn and I get the right stance buff, and that gives me plus 10, to hit or knockdown, that's something I'm going to notice for sure.
Yeah.
The only unicorns that wouldn't would be ones that are already maxed out.
And one thing to note, where I'm sure some people were wondering, why did we make everything to be about power at the beginning? And the answer is that when jousting was first being scoped out, the idea was that different games would have different metas for different unicorns. So yeah, sure, not every unicorn is going to be good at power. That means they're not a good jouster. But maybe this flower is really good at the match 3 game because you need this ability, or they're tuned in various other ways for farming, and have other powers. And that scope has changed over time. As you all know, we change quickly and we try stuff, and when it doesn't work we iterate and go in different directions. And now we've moved into more of just a total stats direction, and then putting that RPS wheel into specific experiences on kind of a lower level. So it was just a change in scope. This was one of these things, like jousting is now, it's an older feature, and it was designed kind of a long time ago, and the process has changed a lot since then. We're now a lot more forward with the community about making changes before we build stuff like this. So I hope this isn't an overreach, Jeff, but it's kind of a relic of the
Yeah,
past. This is part of an old
we
process that's been updated.
the design for jousting as it is now actually started in 2021.
Wow.
Whoa, that's
Seems a
crazy.
while
True.
ago. It's a whole different world.
Yeah, definitely. Um, okay, cool. So streamlining potions. What do we have here?
I mean, this is one the community's asked for, and we definitely wanted to make it clear that we're listening. So um, we're proposing making a change from multiplier-based buffs from potions to flat additions to your stats. So this is obviously something that will make it so that potions benefit lower stat corns more, um, but I think it fits it. With how things are in jousting, I think it makes sense to give players a bit of a catch-up mechanic with potions. Whereas, it's still going to help a high stat corn having a potion. It's just it'll be an
Yeah.
outsized buff to lower stat corns. Whereas right now it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, and this was one, I think I said this to Jeff earlier this week. I wish I had thought about this one a little more, because now it seems obvious to me that flat stats are a little bit better for the current gap that we have. It for me, I hate that the thing that my unicorn needs the most is where I get the least value out of using potions when they're percentage based. And if I have a cloud corn, I know he needs int because he doesn't hit anything. But when I look at the numbers, I'm like, but I get so much value out of 30% power when I have 1,000 power. It's like an order of
Yeah,
magnitude difference. So this will help with that. And at least for me, I think it flips the psychology, where I often walk away feeling like I didn't min max regardless of which one I choose. And I think in this case, I'll rest easy knowing, okay, I just put a tier 3 int potion on. That was my biggest deficit. I solved it. Um, Maybe it's a little more simple, but I like knowing I did the min max. Give me the dopamine hit, Jeff.
well, and what's nice, right? Like, is it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in something like the lower, like an iron bracket, right? Like, if I use a tier 3 potion and that, for example, is like 300 or 400 points, that could over double my stats. So that really allows me to tailor my build a little bit,
Mhm.
even if it is at those lower levels.
Okay, so that takes us to total weights, and this is where we're starting to get into the stuff that's a little bit more flexible and high level. With all of the things we've just presented, it might mean that we don't need to lean on this total weight, just general multiplier, as much as we thought. And this is basically taking the current algorithm that takes into account all these different specific stats and adding kind of a general baseline of, okay, how do we consider the total stats, and just raising that floor. If you're a high stat corn, you just have a better weight, regardless of your breakdown. And before, we were thinking about this as kind of a quick and easy solution that certainly doesn't fix everything, but just does make jousting a little bit better. And after discussing it, I think our thought, we should probably still have some sort of a weight here. And it's also a really great lever for us to have if we ask engineering to build this in, and then we have this variable, then that could be a tuning update where we could say, all right, let's set it to 20%, see how that feels for a while, and go, all right, it's still pretty rough for these high stat candy corns that aren't the right spread. Let's bump that up a little bit more and find that sweet spot. And if we can make it tuning changes, as we said before, a much easier ask. So if there's anything I'm missing there, feel free to add on. But I think that's one decision we'll have to make, is how much do we want to lean on this now that we've got some of these other things that we're considering?
Yeah, I think our main task here will be to kind of figure out that sweet spot because, and as we improve things balance wise with all these other changes, as you rightly pointed out, the less we would need to rely on this. Because if you push it too far, right? You go to 100%. Now we're looking at, yeah, it is all total stats based, but now there's literally no difference between power and endurance and so on. And we do want there to be, each stat to have its own, or score rather, to have its own identity and its own function. So while we could, do something like a special, time period where we go all total stats as some sort of event, I think really what we're targeting here is using this as a bit of a pressure release valve to kind of nudge us in the direction of total stat parity without losing, our stat identity.
All right. So, and this one is an idea that I would like you to talk us through. That more energy, more stats. This was sort of a radical idea that took me a minute to wrap my brain around. So I want us to highlight that this one is certainly theoretical, and would love feedback around this concept specifically. James, what does this look like?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the community thinks of this. This is something that Mitch came up with that I really like, but essentially this would allow you to almost, as kind of another step when you're slotting your unicorn in for a bracket, allow how much energy you want to expend on it with each extra energy point you put in, giving you a buff to all your stats. So that if you just want to say, you know what, I'm just doing the one joust today, I'm going to dump everything in and shoot for the for the stars, I can do that. Or you can spread them out, or if you want to just dump all your energy every time and use berries to refill your energy, you can do that as well. Uh, Jeff, I'm not sure if I'm missing anything there.
Yeah, it would just be another vector besides stance, besides potions. Now, energy would be something you could consider in spending when doing a jousting tournament. So it's just more choices to
So,
make
and do we have
to
concerns
position your
about this
corn.
being like too strong? As an example, a completely bred out corn that, Neviolo's got the highest stat corn. He breeds that thing all the way out and then does a full energy run. I mean, is that hard to balance on both sides? If he loses, he's going to be really mad because he just spent a bunch of stuff and still lost. And if he wins every time, that also sucks because now it's just pay to win. So I hate to say that live so critically, but I think that's like my biggest
It,
concern with a system like
w-
this.
with flat stats, it is. I mean, yeah, he could, but someone who does the same, he's tier 3 potion now with flat stats. The energy would be with flat stats. It would narrow the gap a little bit. Uh, he would still definitely have an advantage for sure, but it does narrow the gap because the weaker corn will have a greater percentage of increase in their stats than the flat numbers to
Mm,
Nebbiolo corn.
okay,
So
that's all right. That's an angle. That's a good response. Um, How much are we thinking for potions in terms of flat stats? Again, not that we have to commit to numbers, but I love to just get a sense of degree for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Right now we've got 10%, 20%, 30%. Are we kind of thinking like 100, 200, 300? Is that sort of ballpark, or is that crazy for a tier 3 potion? Or not crazy enough?
I think that sounds in the right range, right? Like the number I said earlier, for a tier 3, I think was like 300 or 400 points. So that seems, at least, if I was just kind of firing off the hip, that's what would land at. But obviously that's something we need to test and see how those potions impact things.
Just trying to think about how that weights against this energy usage thing. So yeah, with flat numbers, my brain was thinking about percentages before, and now we've switched to a lot more like kind of linear progression type stuff, and that is safer. There's less runaway. So all right, sorry, I'll stop spitballing, but I
Well,
think it's good
not
to pause on this one because this
No, it
is one of the
helps.
bigger. This is a big one, and I want to get like people's brains in the audience thinking so that we can you know, get a discussion going because this has potential to be really cool and burn a lot of berries, but as they say, the devil's always in the details with these sorts of things.
well, and what I like about this is if we did implement this, there'd be now three different uh, factors before you joust that actually behave very differently, right? So uh, with this design, each berry would increase each of your four scores by a flat amount. So it's not really specializing; it's just upping the stats of your corn. Um, the potion is more specific, right? You're targeting a specific score to improve, and then the RPS would just feed into the mechanic that we choose to kind of um, give to it. So I like how each of the three different decisions behave fairly differently. It's not all three being the exact same.
Mm. So I see an interesting question from SKMD, Jeff. So if people are going to be spamming energy for tournaments, and now that berries are no longer going to be on the RMP, does that mean more RBW will be burned through this new kind of flow?
Yeah, we're going to be selling berries through permanent story quests so that you could buy berries for RBW. So yeah, if berry consumption increases by a lot with this change, we'd expect a fair amount of RBW to be burned buying more berries.
Right. That is the fundamental valve. So now that it's off the RMP, oh man. Okay. See, this is working. See, you guys are now red pilling me into this, and now I think I'm getting excited about it. Somebody summarized it very well by saying, like, if you were to do a fully bred unicorn, which you paid for, by the way, right? Like each breed gets more expensive. So those last couple, like, hey, you earned it, dude. Those last 20 of extra score, plus you're paying berries on top of it. It's a pretty good sync for not the biggest gain, but it's a pretty wide spectrum of decision making. And Goliath is pointing out that it could make it feel a little bit more like a game, right? It's a wider spectrum of user choice and risk profile. Okay, maybe you guys are getting me excited. Okay, all right, good work.
Yeah, I mean, this is another area where, we can increase the number of ways players are interacting with the game. So it's it takes a little stress off of each individual one. So it just helps things overall.
Okay. All right. And anything else on this one? Because I think we're coming up towards the end here. Our last slide is about tuning updates in more short term, focus stuff. So, anything else on more energy, more stats? I think this was a good slide to wrap up for major changes because it's definitely the heaviest.
I think that's all I got on that one.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so short term, some of this stuff is going to take a little while, and one thing that I've been thinking about with these live PvP games, I think we need to try to start planning for just more regular updates, and I think there's always a fear to change stuff and not have a lot of time to test things. But again, I think when we're talking about modifiers, as we're going to go through here, we can model some things out and feel fairly confident after enough time and enough data and enough reps making some changes. So that's not a promise or a guarantee. It's more I'm trying to communicate that it's something that we're working on remodeling. There's a lot of discussions internally about what is the right cadence for pushing out updates for these games that are more PvP compared to the more sort of solo vertical progression that a lot of the farm game was for so long. So it's a learning curve here. I as Jeff said earlier, if I had a time machine, if I had started a little bit earlier, I would have maybe advised some different decisions for jousting, but it's all good. We're here. We've got Twilight Tactics coming out. Tribes is around the corner, and it's exciting to think about getting jousting to a place where it's a little more dynamic and a lot more fun, and a real positive thing for the economy. So James, maybe just walk us through here the high level of what you're thinking for our short-term tuning update to polish things up a little bit.
Yeah, as you said, we can tune things pretty quickly. It's just a matter of how much testing goes into each one of those, right? So what we're looking at here, and I've been testing this this week, is one of the things players have been asking for pretty strongly is dialing back the importance or the impact that intelligence has. It intelligence, obviously, its main value is via the to hit rolls. So we're tweaking the int modifier for the hit test down. Um, the change from 6.7 to 6 doesn't mean a whole lot for players, but the idea here is I th- during testing it came out to, I think, if you have a roughly 400 endurance and an 800 int, um, the difference between the tuning that I'm currently testing and live tuning is about an 8% reduction. So um, nothing that's going to destroy overall balance. It should hopefully, it should hopefully bring stars a little closer to parity to clouds and things like that. My big reluctance here was, I don't want to overdo this change, right? And now we're back to clouds are the only dominant class and nobody else can compete. So um, that's kind of the source of why I've been testing this so much. And overall, so it's tweaking this intelligence contribution as well as reducing the overall swinginess of the differential between offensive and defensive stats. So um, that's where the hit test modifier comes in. That is a little bit more global. It doesn't specifically target intelligence, but intelligence is the main culprit in the hit test. So um, that that's where the hit test modifier comes in. And since both of those changes effectively drop the average hit chance, since every unicorn, not just stars, use intelligence, um, we need to kind of increase the base hit chance to compensate so that we don't, change that floor hit chance where we're targeting, the kind of average unicorn should be hitting at worst around 63% of the time. So if we don't compensate for that and we make these changes, we're going to be falling way below that. So that's the reason we have that last change to base hit chance.
Okay. So it seems like there's a lot there, but it's actually not that crazy. This is a tuning update. In this case, we're being pretty transparent about the numbers. Some of that's because, based on all of this, I think there's a decent chance Jousting gets a shakeup moving forward with these other changes anyway. So, not necessarily a bad thing. Jeff, I don't know if you had anything else to add about short term tuning stuff here, but
Yeah, definitely. This is the shorter term tuning we can get out, before these other changes. Um, but yeah, no, I think you and James covered it pretty well.
right. The intelligence less strong, evening out hit chances, slightly higher basic hit chance. One day crystals will be great. I think moons are actually the real. I often joke about candies, but maybe I need to refresh my slides here. We have a summary slide. I have it open on my other screen. Let's see what happened here.
What'd you do?
Sorry about that, gang. There it is. All right. Summary. So, just to run us through what we touched on, super high level, the new bracket types, the iron and the platinum. Iron being gated specifically for low corns, no elo, just some weekday scraps to let folks get a taste of jousting and get some of those precious resources. Um, Platinum bracket on the high end, non-exclusionary, so bigger rewards, bigger entry fee, but 1,800 and over top corns will have the opportunity to play that if they get a little bit tired of tearing it up in gold. Thinking about this jousting leaderboard, one of one unicorns is prizes, something we talked about a lot. Along with this game balance, getting recovery up to snuff, I think is one of the really big ones. Leveling out power, so we have a few more options, and this big energy difference where, along with the potions changes, now you'll be able to decide how much you want to power up your unicorn before you go in. Is it always full send? Is there some value in the middle? We often joke on the Saturday streams, like, man, no potion, and he's still winning rounds. This guy's getting sick value. That's actually going to be like the meta of the game if you have that sliding scale of what you want to do. I like that. Scales are always more fun than tick boxes, you know? Um, Anyhow. And then tuning updates, we just talked about, get something out sooner so that we can tweak things a little bit, shift the meta at least just a pinch, and look forward to bigger stuff. So, like I said at the beginning, we're not going to stay on too long for questions, and we'll open up this thread to continue. But we did get through that fairly quick. We've probably got at least 10 minutes here where we could answer some immediate questions. So if you have anything specific, happy to dive in. Trying to think if there's anything else we missed, but I think we covered a lot. This is it's going to be a different jousting world. And, something like the platinum bracket, I would have hesitated to suggest that, but now that we're doing jousting on the weekends and the liquidity is a lot more concentrated, I think an idea like that becomes possible now. So, some of these things have maybe just opened up a little bit more based on some of the other changes that have been made.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that. I think it also could just, from a community standpoint, be a vehicle for players to get notoriety, right? Like, oh, someone new's shown up on, on the platinum table, so
Mm-hmm.
that'll be cool to see.
I see Jeff is getting people excited, teasing about the potential of tier 7 boosters and figuring out what sorts of calibration they could have and how many resources they might consume. Something to dream about.
Yeah, it seems like that's probably not going to happen for a while, but it's good to get feedback on that.
I'm trying to think if there's anything specific about gems, but I don't think so at the moment. Most of this stuff will work nicely with gems. And again, I think this shift to static numbers instead of percentages just makes me a lot less scared of super runaway stuff. And Jeff, kind of a nerdy, more math oriented question. Let's say you're a 3-part mythic, so you get that nice multiplier on the stats. Does that multiplication happen early in the equation where it's like base unicorn stats, then you get the percentage multiplier, and then all of this other stuff like potions and whatnot get added on top? Or is the addition done first before the multiplication? Or,
So
yeah,
your kind of genetic stats and your gem stats come first. That's your baseline essentially when you enter a joust.
right.
But the mythic bonus would, well, if we end up changing potions, the flat stats, um and implement the energy solution, perhaps. The question is, do we factor in those before the mythic bonus or after? Obviously, if we factor in the flat bonuses first, the mythic bonus is more powerful, right? Because your stats that are being multiplied get
Right.
higher. If you want to make it not as powerful, you would take your base stats, apply the multiplier, and then add in the flat value. So Again, because these are just proposals we haven't thought through. But again, I'd like to see uh, people's responses. If we do this, would you rather have mythic bonuses be more powerful or less powerful in that regard?
It's something to think about. I think the mythic percentages should probably just apply to the base genetic stats, and then most of the addition should take place after that because it helps. I mean, I don't know. This is a little unpopular to say in the blockchain gaming space and sometimes in our community, but we have to be careful of things that make the you want people to be rewarded for having the best stuff, but it can't just always be like the best win more and the rich always get richer, or it gets really it gets like it becomes a runaway sort of spread of resources. So, and for the people at the top, you should want to keep it a little bit competitive because you want these people to keep coming back. You know, you guys are you're like a vampires. You're eating noobs. You know, and if you can keep them alive a little longer, you'll be able to suck a little more blood out of them over the long run instead of just killing them immediately, blade style. You know. So it's true though. I mean, I think it's important to think about if you've got a 5-part mythic and you already have the biggest multiplier because you have like one of the only 5-part mythics. We just want to be careful about how all that stuff stacks because that unicorn's already winning the most anyway. And we want to, I was at this is a little anecdote that's sort of related here, but I was at a conference where somebody that works at EVE Online was speaking, and they said that they track data and they found that when someone loses a bunch of stuff early on, like you get your first nice ship and you fly into scary space and you lose it because you're cocky and don't know how to play, that's a make or break moment. And it's polarizing on both sides. They found that players that stick around, that's the thing that they attribute to and go, oh man, I wanted revenge, like I was going to come back stronger. That was the moment I got hooked and I was in. And then there's this equal but opposite other demographic of gamers that are like, yep, I was having fun, and then that was the moment where I said, yeah, fuck this isn't worth it anymore. I lost all my shit. This game's too hard and stupid. I just don't want to play anymore. And it's interesting how this exact same event creates this polarizing response in opposite directions where it's simultaneously one of their greatest retention and growth vectors and also one of the biggest things that turns off new players. So I always think about that of like early power creep is just something you got to make it sort of accessible for early folks so they can see the potential, but then they have to work really hard to catch up to everyone else. You don't want the gap between the top end and the baseline to get too far, or else it feels hopeless when you're at the baseline, and that's scary. We don't want it to ever feel hopeless for a new player coming in, and that's where the real beauty of game design starts. Jeff, again, feel free to correct me if anything was off with that ramble, but I love that little anecdote.
No, that seems pretty apt here.
Yeah, and a case for the iron bracket.
Which someone suggested we call the plebes bracket.
Wow,
Oh,
that's brutal. That's really brutal. But I like it. I like it. Okay. Well, if we don't have anything else, then I think let's get this uploaded. Let's open up the thread. It seems like the thread from yesterday about make farming great again has been going pretty well. So yeah, gentlemen, if there's anything else, this would be the time. If not, let's close her up.
no, but I
Cool.
don't have any additional comments, I don't think.
All right. Great. Well, happy Friday, everyone. It's been a sprinty week. Twilight Tactics in focus, so let's get excited there. Jeff and James, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate putting this together and making this deck for us to go through. Very helpful. So
Yeah,
for
thank you.
anyone else that would like to engage, look out for the thread and feedback. I'll be opening that momentarily, and we look forward to chatting with you. James, definitely keep an eye out. If you see some questions in
Hmm.
there and stuff we can elaborate on. We just dropped a lot of wildly open-ended stuff to the community, so we'll also be sharing the deck for you guys to run through. I'll share that link here